Terry, welcome to the set of Pawns.
I love it. I love it.
Little Alice in Wonderland for you here.
Sure.
It's an honor to have you here, and you have such an incredible journey, an incredible story. Can you tell me how you came to be in the Berkshires? When did you first come here?
I came to the Berkshires for the first time when I was about 2 years old. My parents were teaching at a school in New Hampshire where I was born, and they got an offer to teach at a school in Lenox called the Windsor Mountain School. And part of their deal to come down and teach at the school was that they got an acre of land on the corner of the property that they could build a house. And I was 2 years old, and they built the house, and I've been living there ever since.
That's incredible. That doesn't happen often when you have such long standing. And the journey that you've been on since you came to the Berkshires is just quite remarkable.
My parents always wanted to have an arts camp, and so since the Windsor Mountain property wasn't being used in the summertime, the headmaster let them have their own camp. So probably it was later in the camp. They only got to have the camp for 6 years.
Okay.
And then the headmaster got an offer from Tanglewood to use the property to house music students. And so he kind of pulled the plug on my parents' camp, which they were not thrilled about. But to kind of make up for it, the headmaster had Tanglewood deal with my father. He was in charge of the property, housing the music students. And
How interesting.
that's
Wow.
when I got my kind of my musical legs.
So how old were you then, would you say, when that all started with the Tanglewood involvement?
I'm gonna say about 9 or 10, because when I turned 11 was when I was taking private lessons from Arthur Press of the Boston Symphony. And that was a result of my father taking me to Tanglewood. And that's because we had all these free tickets.
Right. I believe Arthur Press was the timpaniist.
He was the assistant timpanist, but the #1 percussionist.
Wow. So
So
you got
he
everything
was
then,
up
not
there.
just timpani.
That's right, and that's what
wonderful.
I wanted.
Absolutely.
So tell us more about some of your first experiences with music. Like, when did you choose an instrument?
I wanted to play drums, and my parents said, "That's not an instrument. That's not musical," and they talked me into the clarinet. So at about 9 years old, I got a clarinet. I was taking lessons, and I was in the band, and we went and played at the World's Fair
In New York
New
City?
York,
How
at Shea
exciting.
Stadium.
That's incredible. I was there because
You were
my
there?
father worked for Sinclair and
Huh.
I got to hang out with the Green Dinosaur.
Oh, cool.
Wonderful, but you actually got to play at the World's Fair.
So it took 3 years of playing the clarinet for me to convince my parents that I was a drummer. And I did that by playing really badly on the clarinet and also banging on every pot and pan.
I love it.
And they finally gave up.
I love it. I love it. So when did they finally acquiesce and let you start doing the drums?
I think it was when I was around 11, and I'd been going backstage a lot at Tanglewood with my dad. They tried doing, they did The Who with, I think, Jethro Tull and maybe Jefferson Airplane.
So that
They
was
put
one of
together-
the first ones.
Yeah.
Around what year would you say? Just ballpark, what year would you say?
I'm gonna guess early 70s.
Yeah, that sounds realistic, yeah.
So I would sneak my way backstage, and back then in those days, security was very different. Concert security, there wasn't any. You know, nobody in their right mind was supposed to walk backstage if they weren't supposed to, but I did. And I actually got to unpack Keith Moon's drums because I was there.
That's
They knew I was a
incredible.
drummer, so I took them out of the boxes, and they were mangled because he was very hard on them.
He was mangled too, but he didn't come along while you were
No,
doing
no,
that.
no, no, no. It was
Wow.
at the middle of the afternoon.
How exciting.
And then another one the same summer was a Joni Mitchell concert, and she had Tim Hardin with the opening act, and I thought his set was great. I went out and bought his records, and it was fun being backstage during Joni Mitchell's set because, and I knew so little about music in those days, but apparently she has all these tunings of her guitar.
Open tunings, yes.
They're open tunings, and she had a bunch of guitars all tuned differently. So it was kind of a nightmare. And what she would play a song, they would run the guitar backstage, and I'd be standing there, and she had a man in a suit, in a tuxedo, who stood there. He had perfect pitch, and he would retune the guitars and then send them back out so that she didn't have to deal with it. Because back in those days, they didn't have tuning machines or anything.
That's amazing.
You needed somebody with a great ear.
I have followed in her tradition with that. When I do a gig myself, I'll bring 4 guitars, and they're all tuned differently. So many of them are her open tunings as well. So that's a funny story. So can you tell us about your experience with meeting Carly Simon?
Well, that came a few years later when I went to a summer camp. It was an overnight camp in Stockbridge called Indian Hill. So when I went to that camp, one of the counselors was Carly Simon.
She was a camp counselor.
She was a camp counselor. She had not met James Taylor at that point. She had just come up here for the summer. She was basically a New York person, and she had a singing group with 2 of her sisters called the Simon Sisters. They had put out a couple of records, but hadn't really had hits or anything.
So did she ask you to be her drummer?
Well, not in so many words. I mean, the first summer she was there, I played with her in just an ensemble kind of thing and got to know her better. And then the second summer, she wasn't actually a full-time counselor at the camp that summer. She was just coming in for a couple of weeks. I forget what they call it, but there's a term for that. And while she was there that second time, I had actually graduated from the camp too, and I was working at the theater. But they needed a drummer, and so they had kind of we put together a 5-piece band that was mostly staff and me from the outside.
That's wonderful.
Everyone's favorite drummer.
Ah,
You could play everybody's stuff. That's wonderful to be able to do that.
well, it was great because later on when she married James Taylor, who she probably met one of those summers because he was around, I went to Tanglewood when he was playing and went backstage, of course. And she introduced me to James as my first drummer. And I thought that was really nice.
What an honor. And a
Absolutely.
well-deserved one, too.
Well, and he had Russ Kunkel playing drums for him, which, I was like in awe.
That's wonderful, yes.
Russ Kunkel and Lee Sklar and Danny Korchmar did a long-term residence at Crystal Sound
Oh, really?
when they were recording James's Mudslide Slim,
Oh, wow.
and then also worked with Carole King, and
Sure.
so it's a small world as far as
Everybody.
that goes. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. What can you tell me about the winter of your 13th year? Who did you encounter then? It was some director that his name escapes me at this point in time, but
Arthur Penn,
I think so. Yeah.
who was a famous director by then because he directed Bonnie and Clyde,
Right.
and he also went on to direct Alice's Restaurant and a whole bunch of great movies. And he was a Stockbridge resident,
Is
So
that so?
they brought him in, and he took over a part of it. And then there was a playwright named William Gibson, who actually lives on the same street as Arthur Penn, and he wrote a play called The Miracle Worker about Helen Keller.
Oh, that's fascinating.
And Arthur Penn directed the movie of The Miracle Worker. It wasn't one of his best known movies, but it was a fantastic movie, and it starred this incredible actress named Anne Bancroft. And she may have won something for that. I'm not entirely sure. Well, the first summer they took over, they did a play called I'm not going to remember the name of the play, but I was just up in the rafters. The band was up above the stage, and we did incident. Oh, it was Skin of Our Teeth.
Skin of Our Teeth.
And Anne Bancroft was the star, and Estelle Parsons was in it, and Frank Langella. And all these actors used to love to come to the Berkshires because of what it is in the summer, you know, and they didn't want to be stuck in New York. And so they would come up for less than their normal, you know, pittance.
Sure, because it was like a vacation for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is absolutely
And so
amazing.
that was the first play that Arthur Penn directed, and William Gibson was just kind of hanging around.
Interesting.
And Anne Bancroft was the star. And then the next summer they did a play that William Gibson wrote particularly for Anne Bancroft, called Cry of Players. And it was about the life of William Shakespeare and his wife, whose name was Anne, actually. And on that one, I got a speaking part. They needed on-stage musicians, 3 of us, and so I was playing a little hand drum, but I also had a bunch of lines with Anne.
Exciting.
So it was
So
like
you
my
made-
dream come true.
You took the words right out of my mouth. You made your dream come true.
Here
That
I
is
am, you
so
know, 15 years old, and
remarkable.
I'm playing opposite Anne Bancroft.
So you did get to be the actor.
Briefly.
I would love to hear about your evolution and your journey now as a young budding musician. I mean, you've played in a lot of bands.
Up in North County, we played a big place called Woody's House of Washington in Washington, Mass, right
Is
on
that
Route 8.
on Route 8?
Yes. And it was a big old building. And we played, Shenandoah was one of the house bands, and we played there regularly. But we also opened up for members of the band. I don't know if Bonnie Raitt ever made it there, but a lot of artists played there. And Arlo kept coming to see us because he lived up the road. Had nothing to do with Woody Guthrie. It was Woody's House of Washington, but not connected.
Interesting.
And Arlo just kept coming in, and we thought, oh, that's cool. You know, that's Arlo Guthrie. You know? And one day he just came over and said, so, you guys want to go on tour with me? And we all looked at each other and were like, yeah. Took that long. And that was it. Actually, his producer, a guy named John Pilla, who also lived in the Berkshires and was a big fan of ours and kind of dragged Arlo there, we found out. Also really liked our band and thought we had potential, and we had a lot of original material, and he wanted to record us, and he wanted us to record with Arlo. That was sort of how that all came about.
Where did you record when you recorded with Arlo?
Well, the first recording that we did with Arlo was actually on the road. It was a live recording, and John Pilla produced it. We took just an 8-track reel-to-reel machine at that point, and a sound crew and whatnot. And we recorded about 10 or 15 shows. And then they went back and went through that and put together an album called One Night. and that's the first thing that we actually recorded with Arlo.
That was the very first. Very interesting.
So it was, we didn't get to do any studio work per se. And then the first studio album we did, not that long after that, was called Outlasting the Blues. And that's my favorite Arlo album still today.
Do you have a favorite song off of that album?
Well, I'm just going to say Prologue, which is the first song on it, which is, it's just a great song that Arlo wrote. Very much talks about how he was feeling at the time.
That's wonderful. Around, what's the time frame for that, Terry? Around what year did you guys record that album?
I'm going to say that album we did about 1979 or 80. We had already changed the members in Shenandoah and added Steve and Carol Ide, who added so much to the vocals. I mean, Shenandoah was always a heavy vocal band. That's why Arlo liked us so much. So that was about 79 or 80, and we recorded that at a studio called Longview Farm out of Brookfield, Mass, out toward Boston. And it was one of these places, a beautiful old farm, and we would go there and stay for about 6 weeks. We'd all live there, and that would let Arlo write things overnight if he wanted to, or change things, and it was just a great experience.
How wonderful to be there for that long. I know of that studio. When I first came here myself, I actually went there with my whole family. And my husband, who had been a recording engineer, he recorded some things that I wanted to do.
Oh, great.
Yeah. When did you meet Arlo Bunker?
Well, I met him during the filming of the movie, but not while I was involved. They had a Thanksgiving at Alice Brock's house. It was actually near the old Music Inn, and a bunch of the people from the movie were invited to her house for Thanksgiving, and my brother knew everybody at that point. Somehow got them to let me go. I was much younger than everybody else there, but so I got to go have Thanksgiving at Alice Brock's with about 20 other people, and that's where I met Arlo for the first time.
Can you tell me about some of your television performances with Arlo?
Television performances with Arlo? Sure. We, early on, we did a whole bunch of Mike Douglas shows, but Tammy Wynette was on that show, and she sang Stand By Your Man. And so to get to hear her actually perform an iconic song like that.
And to be part of that history when she was making history with Stand By Your Man.
Yeah.
That's definitely
So that was great.
amazing.
So we did Mike Douglas shows. We did a lot of other various shows, but one of the bigger shows that we did a show called Performance at Wolf Trap for public broadcasting, because it was us and Pete Seeger, Arlo, Shenandoah, and Pete Seeger, and neither Arlo nor Pete would tell them what songs they were going to perform. And Arlo and Pete would swap songs back and forth, and when Pete wasn't singing, he'd lie down on the stage.
You mentioned having close encounters. Can you tell us about some of your close encounters?
Close encounters. Let me tell you about what may be one of the more meaningful close encounters, and that's what I mean by close encounters. We were doing a fundraiser in Cooperstown, New York, against fracking, which was a big deal a few years ago. And it was a co-bill with us and Levon Helm. And at that time, Levon Helm was very ill and could really not speak very much at all. But he was still putting on great shows, and he had a fantastic band. I don't even know the names of the people in the band, but they were great. And anyway, we played our set, did our part of the show, and wonderful audience, went great. And we came off, and then Levon's band came on and played. And we were just, me and Arlo and the rest of our band, we're just standing there watching in awe. And he actually went up and sang a few of the iconic songs that people wanted to hear. But he still was really hurting.
What do you remember him singing?
Just the things off the band.
Did he sing The Wait?
Well,
Sort of.
I'm getting to that. I'm getting to that. So he did his whole set. They come off. The crowd goes bananas. So he's going on to do one more encore song. And it had been prearranged that Arlo was going to go out and a couple of other people from the band, the Burns sisters, who were with us on that tour, were going to go out and do the last song, whatever it was. And he turns around to me. He had 2 drum sets set up because sometimes his daughter played drums with him so that he could go out and play, but she wasn't there that day.
Amy Hill.
Amy Hill. So there are 2 identical drum sets there. And he turns around, I'm standing in the wings, and he holds up a pair of drumsticks and he points at me and he points at the drums and he goes. So I came out, I took the drumsticks and I sat down, and the song was The Wait. He had kept The Wait for his last encore. And so I got to play The Wait with Levon Helm side by side. And if you know the song, in between every verse, there's a drum fill. There's a very iconic kind of drum fill that he does.
I know it well.
So he and I would get to that point and we'd play, and I was trying to lean back and stuff, and he's just looking at me and laughing, and we're just hitting drums, and it was just a wonderful moment. And we played the song, crowd goes bananas, of course, you know, for him. And he comes off, and he still couldn't talk, but he came over to me, and he gave me the biggest bear hug. And he just nodded and smiled. And the next morning at breakfast, Arlo said to me, we were just sitting there, and he said, you know, when you were playing that song, I looked over at you, and you were 10 feet off that drum set. You were just floating in the air. You were so high. And I said, that's exactly right. It was an out-of-body experience like I've never encountered before. But that was of drumming moments, that was the biggest drumming moment of my life.
I feel like you just gave me an out-of-body experience hearing about that. That is remarkable. You know, I understand that you have traveled very extensively on the tour bus with Arlo Guthrie. What are some of your favorite places that you've been to over the years?
Boy, we did with Arlo and Shenandoah over the years, and since Shenandoah, I was lucky enough to travel with Arlo over a 45-year period, which is just mind-blowing to me that that's even possible, but it just flew by. I have a mantra in life, and it's born to tie. I'm not born to win. I'm not born to lose. Born to tie. I just want to go through life having all these wonderful experiences and enjoy them, and I don't need to be a star. I don't need to win billions of dollars, though it would be nice. But born to tie.
So what is the name of your first book?
Well, what a coincidence. I seem to have them here. My first book is called Just a Berkshire Kid. And it's a lot about the things that we've been talking about. I feel really fortunate that I got to grow up around here. And I feel that the opportunities that I had to play with Arlo Guthrie, to be in a play with Anne Bancroft, just all the best things in my life happened because I lived in the Berkshires. And if I'd grown up in Manhattan, uh, I would be competing with all kinds of really great drummers. I never would have gotten a job with Arlo, and I wouldn't have gotten to play with the Big Bear Band and all the hundreds of other people that I got to play with in the Berkshires. So the Berkshires are special to me. I think they're a special area. Well, so the second winter, I went on and wrote more stories of a Berkshire Kid, which is more stories of a Berkshire Kid.
So that's all of the ones where people called you up and said, hey, how come I'm not in here?
Yeah. Arlo's wife, Jackie, inspired me to make little videos. And I love making little videos, and I've gone on to make almost 400 little blogs, little video blogs. And when I was on the road with Arlo, when we did the 50th anniversary tour, it was suggested that I make 50 blogs to go along with each stop that we did. And somehow I did it.
I remember looking at some of those. Some of what went on was amazing. You really
So,
did a great job. You
that's
were
a great
very
thing.
consistent with doing that.
And Arlo would ask me, say, did you do a blog today? What'd you put in it? You know, and he wanted to know about it, but he didn't want me to film him.
How did you get your name, Terry Oliberry?
People want to know. Well, I got my name Terry Oliberry the very first time I went to play with Arlo. We actually, Dave Karen and I took the train from Pittsfield to Chicago. It took about a day and a half, and the other guys drove. But we were sitting around upstairs in the dressing room before we were about to make our first performance with Arlo. And he looks around and he goes, oh man, I don't know your names. Like he knew our first names. He knew David and Terry and everything. But so we went around the room and David Grover, Danny Felica. And I said, well, my name's Terry Hall. And he looked at me and he went, no, that's boring. You're more Terry Oliberry. And that was it. We went out.
Arlo named you?
He introduced the band. He said, and on the drums, it's Terry Oliberry. And he kept saying it. And then the first record came out, One Night came out. It said, on the drums, Terry Oliberry. And I was so proud of that record. And I showed it to my mother and she started crying. And I said, what's wrong? She said, none of our relatives are going to know it's you. I said, don't worry about it. They'll get over it.
Well, Terry Oliberry, I think that your career and your journey is going to go down in history as one of the most special ones. And I just can't wait to see what's around the corner for you next.
I have no idea either. That's the wonderful thing about music and about the things that we do is we never know where it's going or when it's going.
Don't know what's around the bend. I can't wait to find out.
Me too. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, too. It's been an honor and a privilege.
Mine.